Hey everyone, and welcome to today's webinar titled Solving Healthcare's Great Resignation in 2022. My name is Brooke. I am a junior marketing coordinator here at Mend. Today, I have the privilege of joining Matt McBride, CEO at Mend. Matt, how are you doing today?
Brooke, I'm doing great, and I'm really excited about this presentation today. I have to say, I think, of those that saw this in the company as it was being developed, they seem to really be excited about it. And so I think there's going to be a lot of valuable stuff we're going to cover for the audience today.
Awesome to hear that. We have some great info for all of you today, so let's dive right into our agenda for this webinar. For the agenda today, we are going to explore industry data around employee attrition, data and trends on remote work and healthcare, and finally, how patient engagement can play a valuable role when facing some of these challenges. After the presentation, we will finish with a Q&A session. Starting now, you can use the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom toolbar, and we'll get to as many questions as we can at the end. Let's go ahead and get started. There are many heroes in healthcare. The pandemic added a lot of stress to the healthcare system in the US. Matt, can you define healthcare attrition for the audience today?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, this problem isn't exclusive to healthcare. I think we've probably all heard of this term, the Great Resignation, and it really being felt throughout every industry. But considering that healthcare was really responsible for helping us get through the pandemic, along with maybe everything else that was going on, I think this is an industry that has really been impacted by it, and something that a lot of health leaders are looking at. How do we deal with this? How do we solve this? And so I think we're going to have some great insights today. But just to start with the problem, according to the American Hospital Association, 20 to 30% of the workforce has been lost. So that's a huge amount of potential turnover there. According to the AMA, 1 in 5 physicians and 2 in 5 nurses intend to leave their current practice within 2 years. That's not a lot of time. So I think, sort of contributing to the stat from the American Hospital Association, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, 3% are quitting each month. So, that's about 1.7 million people. And then the AMA has also reported, and I think something that, has existed in healthcare for a long time, is this thought of, well, there's a physician shortage. There's a shortage of healthcare workers. So before the pandemic, it's not like the pandemic just caused all of these problems to occur. We were already talking about physician shortages, burnout, and some of these other things. And then the pandemic happened. So definitely something that is probably touching many healthcare organizations. And we will cover some potential solutions.
Matt, if we shift gears to surveys of frontline workers, what is that data telling us?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting as you look at the data and some of the surveys that are trying to understand, well, what does the optimism look like? What's the problem look like? And so it is interesting. There's still a lot of optimism, but there's some problems to address. So I think what this data is telling us, where you've got 76% hopeful, 67% optimistic, 63% motivated, but I think on the other side, people are saying, we're burnt out. We need some help. And so I think if organizations can look at some of these areas that are, causing people to be anxious and stressed and burnt out, and some of these other things, if organizations can focus on that, there's definitely still a lot of optimism. And healthcare the work in healthcare comes with a lot of purpose, and you can really help a lot of people. We're all patients. Everybody is, has been a patient, will be a patient. So I think there's a lot of mission and purpose behind the work that is being done. And if these problems can be addressed, there's still a lot of optimism out there.
It seems that frontline workers are satisfied with the sick leave, especially due to COVID, and overwhelmingly, employees feel they have access to vaccinations. Matt, what else stood out to you in reports from the front lines?
Yeah, so one of the key data points, and I think this is specific to the pandemic. So people felt like they could get sick leave, they had access to vaccinations, all those things, but hazard pay was definitely high on the list, and you can kind of see the results based on the setting, right? And it doesn't change too much. You might think, oh, well, yeah, the hospitals, that makes sense. But the pandemic can really touch any facility. So it seemed like hazard pay and maybe coming up with a program within an organization to address this. Compensation isn't everything, and there's some other opportunities as well, but hazard pay definitely stood out as an opportunity to help address some of the issues with the Great Resignation and attrition and the turnover that we're seeing. And it seemed like any level of care, any setting of care, there's an opportunity to address hazard pay or look at a hazard pay program for folks that might be in vulnerable situations.
The Surgeon General sounded the alarm this year on burnout among healthcare workers. Matt, what are some of the highlights from the AMA burnout benchmarking report?
Yeah, and we already touched on this a little bit. Burnout was something that was being talked about before the pandemic. Pandemic hits. Now, we've got the Surgeon General warning on it. And so I think some of this data is pretty astounding. So according to the AMA, 72% were satisfied with their current job. So that's decreasing. 52% were experiencing a great deal of stress. That's a 4% increase. So not quite in the direction we want to be going. 58% of burnout seen in respondents 6 to 10 years in. So definitely the folks that have been in the organization for a long time, there's definitely an opportunity to place some emphasis there. But then looking at the EHR time outside of normal scheduled work hours is excessive or moderately high, 46%, so half. And then 4.3 hours on average spent outside of normal working time on different administrative tasks. So that's half a workday right there that folks are saying that's what they spend administratively outside of just a normal working time. And so there's definitely opportunities, and I think every organization should be looking at how they can minimize that. But one thing that really stood out is that 60% of individuals who feel valued by their organization have 60% lower odds of experiencing burnout, anxiety, depression, likelihood to leave. So we already touched on hazard pay, but it's not always about hazard pay. Sometimes it's just about making people feel valued. So and we're going to get into this in more detail, that's definitely something that I think really stands out among the data, and something that every organization can work on, and really recognizing and the folks that are on the front lines caring for people every day.
Making employees feel valued seems like an important area, excuse me, to address employee retention and satisfaction. Matt, what did you find from Indeed?
Yeah, so I thought Indeed had a really good summary of some different buckets to look at. And we won't go through all of these. Some of these are related to compensation. Some of these are related to growth opportunities, recognition, so on and so forth. And so this is something that Mend looks at as an organization too, is how can we make sure that people are being recognized, people are being valued, that we're celebrating successes and all of these different things. And so what we've actually done is we've taken these 15 different areas and put them into different groups. We have, all 15 accounted for. We've made some modifications to that and sort of place them in buckets of compensation, growth, so on and so forth. And then we have a department by department matrix that every leader in the company, every manager in the company looks at. And then can we check each of these 15 boxes? Can we check each of these 15 boxes at an organizational level, that we're addressing these and meeting these areas? And then can we check these boxes at a department level? Are we checking all these boxes? Are we meeting all these needs? What is it that we're doing? How are we accomplishing this? And so this is something that as a leadership team, we actually look at Mend to make sure that we're valuing and showing appreciation towards all of the people that help and work with our customers. And our customers, of course, are organizations like the folks attending today who are caring for patients. So I think this is something that is actionable, that may not require a huge investment beyond time. So I think this seems like an area that organizations can really have an impact, and leaders can really have an impact, and help retain staff and help staff feel more valued.
Matt, we've talked today about a lot of high-level studies. What did you find from in the Minnesota Post recently for our audience today?
Yeah, so there was a good article by Dr. Rice in the Min Post, not too far back, very recent. And he was describing some of the environment and colleagues, and Minnesota does have a lot of rural areas. So some of this is specific maybe to rural areas, but a lot of it isn't. And I thought, well, this for this webinar, this might be a good example at the micro level, right? We've been talking a lot at the macro level. Well, what are the physicians actually saying is contributing to the burnout and some of the dissatisfaction and plans to maybe move up their retirement? And I think what was interesting in this article is Dr. Rice was already considering moving up his retirement before the pandemic hit. And so these are the areas that he felt like he and his colleagues we're seeing as big issues. And so I think these issues are maybe opportunities. Can these items be addressed? So red tape from health insurers, stress from the pandemic, the consolidation of medical practices, emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, loss of personal accomplishment. So I thought at a more granular level, to just further identify the problems, I thought this was a great example and an article that is worthwhile having a look and having a read online.
Before we begin our next section on remote work and hybrid work, it's time for an audience poll question. The question is, has healthcare's Great Resignation affected your organization this year? The poll question should be appearing now, and we'll give everyone about a minute to answer. And then once everyone is done, I will share the results with all of you, and then we'll move on to remote work. Looks like we have just a few more responses coming through. Give everyone about 10 more seconds. Okay, so 95% of you said yes and 0% for no. Matt, what do you think of these results?
Yeah, I mean, and like we said at the beginning, healthcare isn't alone. I think this is something impacting probably every organization at some level this year. So, well, good. Well, I think we're going to have a lot of other valuable insights throughout the rest of the presentation here.
All right, we will continue. Remote work boomed across all sectors during the pandemic, and many think it is here to stay. Matt, what does remote work look like in healthcare?
Yeah, and healthcare can be a little bit different compared to maybe other types of companies that maybe you could be all remote. I can tell you we have seen healthcare organizations go all remote. And I think there is some opportunities. It really seems like the pandemic pushed folks into wanting more remote work or wanting a hybrid work scenarios. And so this is an interesting trend in healthcare, something that may help be able to attract and retain people, and then tap into larger pools of potential talent to fill roles on staff. So some surveys from the MGMA and Gallup. So 59% of medical group practices said they shifted workers to permanent or hybrid work in 2021. So that's a lot. That's a huge percentage. 13% were considering remote. So of the people surveyed at the time, 59% were already remote and 13% were considering it. So that's a huge percentage. And then in the Gallup poll, we saw that they recorded 35% remote work rates in healthcare. So again, not just limited to healthcare, but maybe an industry where you think, oh, well, that can't really be done remotely. And then we're seeing huge trends in the pandemic, obviously, and something that's likely to continue into the future.
I enjoy working remote, and I know the majority of my coworkers prefer remote work. Matt, what did you find in a recent Gallup poll?
Yeah, so let's look at what employees think about this, right? So this is a broader poll beyond just healthcare, but 91% of workers in the US working at least some of their hours remotely, and hoping that ability to work from home persists. So this is definitely something that people want. 54% of employees who work remotely at least some of the time say they would ideally like to split their time between home and office. So I think the human interaction, seeing people in person, I know whenever we have in-person company events, everybody really values that, appreciates that. So something that you still have to pay attention to. 76% of remote workers say their employer will allow people to work remotely going forward, or at least partially. I would say before the pandemic, we were probably split, about 50% were remote. And once the pandemic hit, we went completely remote. And as it settled down and just talking with people, it seemed like everybody really wanted to continue to stay remote. They valued the time that they saved having to commute and other areas that we'll kind of get into some of these slides. And so it's definitely something that has continued within our organization. So continuing on with some of these results, 30% of employers are at risk of losing talent if they do not allow remote work. So going back to the Great Resignation, retaining folks, dealing with attrition, this is definitely another tool that can be looked at to help retain the talent that you already have, and then tap into wider pools of talent that may not be located right in your geographic vicinity. And then finally, 66% of workers don't foresee remote work harming company culture. So I know that's going to be important to a lot of leaders, definitely something that we think a lot about and look at, how will this impact productivity, culture, all these different things. At least the employees don't feel like it will harm, but there's a culture, but there definitely does have to be some adaptations there.
It's pretty clear that most of the workforce desires some form of remote work. Matt, what are some of the reasons why employees have this preference?
Yeah, I think, time is a precious commodity. We all have 24 hours in a day. We all, a minute's going to be a minute for everybody. You can't, buy your way into a minute now being 5 minutes. So I think time is something that people really value. And that definitely seems to be a key reason for wanting to work remotely. So avoiding that commute, I think people feel, they say they feel more productive. Maybe there's less distractions, less people walking by your desk and striking up conversations. So people feel like there's a little bit better productivity there, which leads to better well-being. Again, fewer distractions. And then just having that flexibility to balance family and other obligations. So not always the case for everybody in healthcare, but some folks, maybe they've got to take a child to school, pick a child up. So maybe you take that break, that 30-minute break in the day, but then you just extend your workday by 30 minutes. Or, we've got folks that maybe start at 7 or 8 to shorten up their day to take care of family obligations, or maybe people that start their day a little bit later to take care of stuff in the morning, or sort of split their day up differently. So I think people feel like there's a little bit more flexibility there to just kind of balance work-life responsibilities. But definitely seems to be something that folks value and are looking for.
I listened to this episode and it was interesting hearing the virtual first approach of four days virtual and 1 day in clinic. Matt, what else did you learn in your conversation with Dr. Sakamoto?
Yeah, so it was a great conversation on our podcast. And this is a virtual first primary care model. So I thought this was really interesting, is we maybe sort of challenge assumptions that we have, right, around can healthcare be virtual? Can healthcare be remote? Can physicians do this? Value-based care is going to drive things in this direction. So I think if you want to kind of get a glimpse into what the future is going to look like, a big portion of the future is going to look like for healthcare, this model was really interesting. So 4 days fully virtual, 1 day in clinic. And so that was really interesting. We also, in this episode, touched on, empathy around virtual care, value-based care with telemedicine. I think one of the reasons why this was possible is the patient panel and the payer associated. The physician, Dr. Sakamoto, was operating in a value-based model, which is where things are trending. And we even touched on some of the different examination techniques and how things have to change a little bit when you're working with somebody over video and kind of coming up with new ways to perform assessments and arrive at a diagnosis. But as we sort of think, well, this can't be done. This is where things are headed, and this isn't 1 day virtual, 4 days in person. This is 80% of the week virtual, and then one in office day to see patients if that's warranted. So definitely a glimpse into a little bit of the future here.
Before we begin our next section on solutions to some of these challenges, it's time for a second audience poll question. This question is, how much of your staff is hybrid or fully remote? And again, I will give everyone a few seconds here to put in their responses. And then once I see the responses stop coming through, I'll share the results, and then we will move on to our final section for the day. I'll give everyone just a few more seconds in case we have some last minute responses come through. So it looks like the majority, for 76 to 100%, 29% of you voted for that option. And as far as 0%, we only have about 14% there. And then a little bit in the middle with 1 to 25%. Matt, what are your response to this?
Oh, really? I'm really impressed to see so many fives. I didn't, I have to say, I didn't expect that, but that's awesome to kind of see that organizations are leveraging remote work and hybrid work options. So that's awesome. And I think that's definitely a trend, not just in healthcare, that's going to continue, something to definitely pay attention to, that every organization should be looking at.
All right, thank you, Matt, and thank you for those that answered our questions for today, and then we'll continue our webinar. Matt, to kick off the last section around automation and patient engagement, can you give an overview of some of the opportunities that exist for the audience today?
Yeah, so there's definitely opportunities and solutions out there that are available to automate or empower patients to do some of the work versus always relying on staff to do things manually. And so just looking at Mend as an example, we'll touch on some of these and just highlight some of the ways that this can help with staffing issues. But technology can play a role too, not just, it's probably not just one single solution that's going to solve the great resignation in healthcare. There's going to have to be some automation, hybrid work, um, programs to value and recognize employees, hazard pay, and probably other different solutions. But there are definitely things that can be automated, empowering patients to schedule, to complete forms, to make payments during the visit with telehealth. There's definitely ways to empower patients and providers, or be able to just facilitate that remote work opportunity, and then even automate things after the visit. So following up with different surveys or other information, capturing payments automatically. So there's definitely an opportunity using patient engagement. We're going to go a little bit deeper into some of these areas.
Solutions like Mend can automate patient payments before or after a visit with the use of text and email. Matt, how can this help organizations dealing with staffing issues?
Yeah, so how much staff are dedicated to collecting payments, to processing payments, maybe dealing with the forms that go out, and other collection areas where a lot of these items, there's new opportunities to engage patients around email and text message, or other ways to automate, empower patients, automate them, give them a better experience that they want. And we can see in some of this class research from early adopters, as this term patient financial engagement is really becoming a newer opportunity and a newer term in healthcare. We can see that from class, 64% of early adopters of patient financial engagement technology reported an increase in collections. 55% reduced their costs. 27% saw reduced AR days, and 18% got a bump in patient satisfaction just by removing friction and making payments easier for folks. And so as a result, 46% of respondents said ROI was immediate. So there's definitely an opportunity to create automations here, take some stress and some burden off of staff, and have them focus on more valuable tasks within the organization.
The pandemic put a lot of stress on healthcare workers, but it also brought massive adoption of telehealth and remote work. Matt, how can telehealth help solve burnout and staffing issues?
Yeah, so we've seen some customers go almost 100% virtual, closed locations, converted the entire practice to telehealth. And so of course there's savings, right? Just savings in the brick and mortar. And in some of those organizations, we saw go from provider shortages to provider wait lists. So I think, telehealth is something that we kind of saw in the data that people are looking for this. And so organizations that have these options, especially for clinicians, are going to have an advantage when recruiting. So telehealth can really help there. I think some other potential benefits might need less staff. You don't have to turn all the lights on, have the building, have all of these different expenses and overhead, and then staff, supporting the different areas of the location. So a lot of times there can be less support staff that's needed. Your geographic area to recruit providers, you can really recruit a provider from anywhere in the world, as long as they're licensed in the state where they're going to see patients. So the opportunity to recruit folks is greater, don't have to deal with relocation and some of those other issues. There's the potential to reduce burnout, just giving providers that opportunity through or remote work or hybrid work that we've already covered a little bit. Telehealth visits can be faster, which We saw some of the administrative tasks, 4.3 additional hours of administrative tasks. Some of those things could be simplified or done, right after the visit, as visits tend to be shorter through telehealth, or can be. And then there's, to help with some burnout and the administrative tasks. I think there's more opportunities for workflow around single screen, multi-screens, so on and so forth. So definitely there are opportunities to leverage telehealth to aid in the Great Resignation.
If I need an appointment with my doctor, I have to call and a staff member manually will schedule me. Matt, how can patient self-scheduling simplify this process?
Yeah, so I think, patients want to be empowered, right? And by empowering patients to schedule their own appointments, reschedule appointments, cancel if they need to, the need to have a massive call center, to have somebody answer the phone, these things can be reduced over time. And by giving patients the power to do these things, you can be rewarded with lower no-show rates, right? If somebody's trying to manage their work-life balance, and they try to call in the lunch break and there isn't somebody there that can help them with the appointment, these types of things end up in no-shows. It's after work, it's late, they got the kids to bed, and now is when they have the first time to call to change the appointment, but nobody is there to answer the phone and be able to make the change to the appointment. So by simply empowering patients, not only is there potential to reduce no-shows, but also there's less demands on staff to man the phones and schedule appointments, make changes, et cetera. So there's definitely opportunities here to create automation in an organization around patient scheduling.
Paper forms seem to be another labor-intensive process. Matt, how can digital forms play a role addressing some of the issues we discussed today?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think first the patient gets a clipboard. They don't quite understand why they're being handed a clipboard, and a lot of these pieces of paper, they have to put the same information over and over again. And then they probably don't even realize they hand the clipboard back, and then somebody's, keying that in to an EHR, practice management system, what have you, which, that can be error prone. Again, if you empower patients, empower them, send them the forms in advance. This is a great appointment confirmation too. Get the person to start engaging in their care before they ever arrive, right? Allow them to give you all the information so they can stand in front of their medicine cabinet. They can give you all of their prescriptions accurately. And then this information can just be moved automatically into the patient's chart. We don't have to have staff keying it in, making mistakes, spending those hours in labor, doing a task that really isn't adding value to the care or organization. So again, this is another key piece that can be automated and reduce the burdens on staff in an organization.
I've had appointments in the past where a staff member calls to remind me of an appointment. If I need to make a change to an appointment, I always have to call versus doing it online. Matt, what are some other ideas to automate common tasks?
Yeah, so appointment reminders. There's still organizations that call manually, leave messages about appointments. So these things can be automated through text, email, and phone calls, of course, as well. But then other things can be attached to these appointment reminders. So maybe a check-in process, the ability to reschedule, the ability to cancel, the ability to do your paperwork, to be integrated and automated, but still represent your organization and your brand. So any of these things that are being done, manually today, there's opportunities to automate a lot of these touch points with patients, empower patients, and have staff doing other more valuable tasks.
If you are looking for more informative content, we keep a library in the resource section of the men.com website. We have a more in-depth product presentation of payments titled How to Automate Patient Payments Before and After the Visit. Simply navigate to men.com, click on resources, and you can access all of our on-demand content there. In our white paper section, we have brand new content titled How Telehealth Can Fight Healthcare's Great Resignation. For those in our audience interested in this content, just go to men.com, click resources, and then click on to white papers. And with that, Matt, let's go ahead and jump into our questions. And as a reminder to our audience, Zoom has that Q&A option in the toolbar to make it easier for us to answer your questions. Amy asks, when will automated payments be available through Ment?
Yeah, great question. It's available now. We have customers that are seeing a lot of success with that. So whether we collect credit cards, put them on file, charge them automatically, or if we're sending a digital invoice out, we can integrate with the medical billing software, grab those balances, grab those co-pays, send those out, get those payments, and record them back all through text and email. And so instead of waiting on a cycle to send out paper statements, you can send something that is a lot more user-friendly, that's going to create a lot more engagement, that's going to reduce AR days and increase collections. You can utilize text and email and really speed up those patient payments and sort of add that into the mix of payments, ways that a person can pay. So that option is available now.
I see two of the same similar questions, so I'm going to go ahead and combine them. Will the recording be sent out to those attending, and how can we get a copy of the presentation?
Yeah, so after the event, we usually circulate the content for those that attended. And then we also have the content within the resources section of our website. So there is an accompanying ebook as well that we can try to send out, and that we will also have up on our website. And so that will give a lot of the additional context, not just the slides themselves. That'll give a lot of the additional context. And then we always record these, and then within a day or two, we'll have the recording of the event up in the resources section of the website. And we also try to send as much of the information out after the event to those that attended as well.
Brian is asking, is patient self-scheduling integrated?
Yes, so we set up a bi-directional connection for patients and appointments. So that allows for a number of different things. It allows for patients to self-schedule appointments, make changes to appointments. It does allow staff as well to potentially schedule appointments in men. So for example, we in a virtual visit, there's an option to book a follow-up that the provider can click, book the follow-up visit, and then that gets synchronized back. So there's opportunities for more efficient workflows for staff, providers, and patients, and it is all fully integrated and synced up. So it is fully integrated. Now, there are options if an integration just isn't possible for whatever reason. It's rare if there's some limitation with the system that you're using. we can still allow those changes to come through. They are presented on a dashboard in our system, and then staff can process those changes. But that oftentimes is a lot faster and a lot easier than just having somebody man the phones, do all this, spending a lot of time on a call, sort of processing this one by one. It can be sort of go into a queue and staff can process it. So there are workflows either way, but we want that automation, and we definitely can achieve that through bidirectional integration.
Melanie has a question. You mentioned a customer that ended up with a provider waitlist after moving to telehealth. What else can you tell us about that customer?
Yeah, so I think this is, that customer is in the behavioral health space, which I think, all of behavioral health is probably moving towards virtual, or almost all virtual where that's allowed. There's some debate in Congress over requiring an in-person visit. Pretty much all of therapy could be done remotely, and so definitely seeing that trend within behavioral health. And we also touched on the podcast with Dr. Sakamoto and the virtual first primary care, 4 days virtual, 1 day in person. So I think this is something that's intriguing to a lot of providers, a lot of clinicians, and they were able to make this change. They had a lot of patients coming in, and the providers were remote. So that's what they kind of offered at first, is they still had the patients come in, but the providers were almost all remote, and then just converted. Once they found our technology and found our platform, they were able to close about 3 or 4 locations, a lot of savings there, and then really doubled down on virtual, and ended up going from, like I said, a provider shortage to a provider wait list. So I think that just speaks a lot to what clinicians are looking for, and the future generations of clinicians even more are going to be looking for those options. And I would say that it's even allowed them to be more flexible with the care that they offer. They've got folks that work on weekends, that work on nights. So I think they have a much larger pool of folks, and a much larger hours of operation to help folks and kind of provide that flexibility, so that maybe somebody that's working and has childcare, they maybe can do their therapy or get services during times when a normal practice will be closed. So they've seen a lot of benefits, and it's been really positive for their organization.
And we have a question coming from an anonymous attendee. Do you create copays and send them to patients without staff needing to verify benefits?
Yeah, we don't create copays. I mean, we've got to understand eligibility first, and what the copay is, and all of those sorts of things. So we will integrate, find that information, and we can send that in advance of a visit. And then maybe after the visit, once the claim has been adjudicated and now there's a balance that's known, we can grab those balances and get those out immediately. We can put cards on file and charge those automatically, or get an invoice out to somebody that they can pay in a frictionless experience. But we don't create copays or anything along those lines. We will capture that information from your systems and then send that out accordingly.
All right, thanks, Matt, for those useful answers to all of our questions for today. Although that concludes our Q&A portion, I do want to note that Matt leaves his email open, matt@men.com, for any further questions. If you guys think of something after this webinar, you can feel free to email him and he will get to your questions as soon as he can. I wanted to thank everyone for tuning in and joining Matt McBride and myself today. Always a pleasure discussing telehealth with you, Matt, and we hope you all tune in again next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.